Premanand Haribo. If you can come closer a little bit if possible. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanam Jana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Shreshtam Manumapi Satriputram Matra Sharupam Rupam Tasya Grachamuru Purim Matrim Gashtavatim Radha Kundam Giribaram Maho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratitha Gripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natasmi Vantha Kalptarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Nikhila Shruti Mole Ratnamaladiti Nirajita Padapankajanta Aji Mukta Kulerupashyamanam Paritestam Harinam Samshrayami Anarpita Charim Tirat Karunayavatarnakalam Shumar Paitamunnatosh Balarasam Svabhakti Shriyam Hari Purata Sundara Dyuti Kadamba Sandipita Sadha Hridai Kandaresh Purato Vasatinandana Ajanulambita Pucho Kanaka Vadatu Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Takshu Vishwambharo Diyabaro Jugatharmapala Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataru Ladini Shakti Swarupaya Gauranga Suridaya Cha Bhakta Shakti Pradhanaya Gadadhara Namastute Ye Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Radhe Vrindavanadishi Karunamrita Vahini Kripaya Nijapadabja Dasyan Mayam Pradiyatam Bhaktya Bihina Aparadha Lakshay Shiptashtakamadi Tarangamadhe Dipamaitvam Shajanam Prapanam Vrinden Maste Charanarvindam Vrinden Maste Charanarvindam Srila Gurudev ki jai, Shriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Shri Ekadasi ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanand. So, good afternoon to all of you, good evening, whatever. Welcome. Thanks so much for the invitation here as well. And today we are having our last meeting in this area. And the idea, the invitation, the suggestion has been to speak about the unique treasure of Sadhu-sanga. Not so much mainly about which is the treasure that comes from Sadhu-sanga, but how Sadhu-sanga is itself, its unique treasure, if you will. Of course, we can speak about some byproduct treasures, but Sadhu-sanga in itself is for its own sake, if you will. That's our own orientation. So I'll try today to also, since it's the last meeting, somehow recap some of the main topics we have shared during the last 2 weeks in the different talks, because somehow, without intending, but there has been some type of connected narrative and topics that can be thread together in this presentation today, and also in connection to the book I've published recently, and also in connection to the book I'm starting to think about writing next, as we spoke in Bhakta-bandhav recently. And that's the dilemma of the author. You are supposed to be promoting your book and you're thinking about writing the next one, but what to do? So there are many things in connection to this notion of the unique treasure of Sadhu-sanga. So I'd like to start invoking one well-known verse from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Bhakti Janma Mool Hoy Sadhu-sanga, Krishna Prem Janmetin Ho Punar Mukyanga, which speaks about things written in this book and things that I plan to write the next one, and are quite connected to both of them. In one sense, this verse is saying, Krishna Bhakti Janma Mool Hoy Sadhu-sanga. The root cause for the birth of Krishna Bhakti is Sadhu-sanga. And the second line, which is especially interesting for today's topic, is even when you attain Krishna Prem, Janmeten Ho Punar Mukyanga. Even when you attain Krishna Prem, Sadhu-sanga remains Mukyanga, remains the main aspect of your practice. That's a very interesting notion in itself. Now, Sadhu-sanga not as a means to a goal, but as a goal unto itself. As the Bhagavatam is saying, Bhaktya Sanjatya Bhaktya, Bhakti comes from Bhakti, and Bhakti points towards further Bhakti. Similarly, we could say Sadhu-sanga comes from Sadhu-sanga, because to say Bhakti comes from Bhakti is another way of saying Sadhu-sanga comes from Sadhu-sanga, since Sadhu-sanga is Bhakti. And Sadhu-sanga points towards upgraded, maximized Sadhu-sanga. It's not that you reach Golokan, no need for Sadhu-sanga. No? One of the symptoms that you are there is that you are actually needy in the fullest sense of the term. Not only you, but especially Sri Radha and Krishna and all the Nitya Parishats there. There you will find the highest degree of neediness. And you will be required for serving and assisting their neediness. That's how a spiritual identity comes, basically. A spiritual identity means the result of myself identifying with the necessity of service. So I identify with the necessity of service, and identity comes through that identification. So when you reach the land of necessity of service proper, I mean, it has to correspond with a spiritual identity that needs to be fully equipped to deal with that necessity of service. You follow my point? So it's very important idea to understand. For us, Sadhu-sanga is not, again, something temporary, but a goal unto itself, to be upgraded and upgraded ad infinitum. No end to that. So that's a little bit in connection to the point of my book, which of course has to do with whether bhakti is inherent or not in the jiva. I won't bore you to death with that topic. I've already done so with Trunam Ras and so on. But this verse that I'm quoting speaks about how Sadhu-sanga is the birth of bhakti, or another way of saying bhakti comes from bhakti and goes towards more bhakti. But also, it's connected to the topic of what I'm thinking to write next, which is about Mahaprabhu and the ultimacy of Gaur Tattva and the possibility of a Nitya Navadvip, and how Mahaprabhu represents the most upgraded version of the Absolute, if you will, as I like to say. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sri Gaur Sundar is the Supreme Personality of Krishna. And basically why we could say, well, in one of the many ways we can say that is Mahaprabhu is Krishna showing the glory of Sadhu-sanga. Krishna looking for Sadhu-sanga. Krishna himself appearing as the Sadhu and begging for a particular type of Sadhu-sanga through which he will nourish himself and attain the purpose of his descent, basically. As we know, Mahaprabhu has one primary reason for his descent, divided in three, and eventually he becomes successful in that project by the Sadhu-sanga that he's receiving from very specific personalities like Rai Ramananda, Damodar Sarup, Gadadhar Pandit, and so on. So Mahaprabhu, in one sense, is the god of Sadhu-sanga, if you will. So in that connection, this verse that we have quoted here still applies. So basically for us, Sadhu-sanga, again, is a very interesting notion, not a means, but also a goal for us, and again, for Krishna himself in the form of Mahaprabhu. And Krishna himself in his form of Raja Krishna, he's always looking for Sadhu-sanga, technically speaking. You take out Sadhu-sanga from the Absolute, he's basically saying you take out his associates, and basically you are saying Krishna is no longer Krishna. If you take out Sri Radha from Krishna, Srila Prabhupada says, Krishna is the all-attractive, but without Sri Radha next to him, he's not that attractive. No. But the closer he gets to his Swarup Shakti in the dynamics of Lila, then we can speak about the all-attractive. No? Like implying Krishna is made, hopefully you understand my point, the form he manifests corresponds with the type of love he's receiving. You take all the loves of the Brajavasis out from Krishna, you no longer have Braja Krishna. You have undifferentiated Brahman without the interaction with its Shakti, basically. So Brahman is the absolute, but his internal Shakti is not playing out with himself in the context of Leela. And when you put Swarup Shakti, different types of Swarup Shakti that will make for Ramachandra, we were celebrating Ram Navami the other day. So that's Braja Krishna, but surrounded by the Dasya Bhakti of Hanuman, if you will. So the absolute will respond, Yatmam Prapadanti, accordingly, in reciprocation. So my point is, Sadhu-sanga is not only important for us, but it's crucial for the absolute himself. You take out Sadhu-sanga, the absolute is no longer the absolute we worship. Braja Krishna, Gaur Sundar. But again, let's focus for a moment in ourselves, what to speak of the absolute. Sadhu-sanga is so important, not as a means only, but as a goal. This is very unique to our Gaudiya tradition, because generally most of the other schools of thought, you have a sadhana and you have a sadhya, but the two of them are not the same thing. You engage in a certain sadhana to attain a particular sadhya, which is not exactly a maximized version of the sadhana you embraced to attain that goal. You want to attain, I don't know, Swargalok, you engage in karma, some form of karma, and you engage in penance, in tapasya, whatever. You deprive yourself from certain stuff, so eventually you can reach heavenly delights. So you deprive here of certain things so you can fully enjoy there. So there's a big difference between the sadhana you embrace and the goal you want to attain. Or you embrace the Jnana Marg. Again, eventually the closer you get to Brahma Sayuja, you start to discard all the ingredients of your sadhana just to go to the experience of oneness, if you will. But bhakti is very different. Bhakti is, the more you advance in bhakti, the more bhakti you are practicing. It's not that you start to reject bhakti when you get closer to your goal to do something else apart from bhakti. There's nothing else above bhakti. And that shows the superiority of bhakti, basically. Since bhakti is the highest thing, you practice bhakti to attain bhakti, because there is nothing higher than bhakti. If you practice bhakti for something else, it means something else is higher than bhakti, or you are taking bhakti in a lowest conception to facilitate you something that is not as glorious as bhakti. Someone asked once Srila Prabhupada, which was the result of, I think we shared that the other day, which is the result of chanting Hare Krishna, and he said that you will be able to chant more Hare Krishna. As simple and as substantial as that. So we have to be able to grasp the whole thing. So again, for us, Sadhu-sanga is the means, Krishna Bhakti Janmamula is Sadhu-sanga, and Sadhu-sanga is the goal. Once you attain Prem, we start to speak in Sadhu-sanga in the fullest sense of the term. Srila Jiva Goswami makes that comment when he comments on the definition of sadhana bhakti in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Kriti Sadhya Bhavet Sadhya, and so on. He mentions actually sadhana bhakti is like a preliminary engagement for the real bhakti. I mean, not to downplay sadhana bhakti, but like implying real bhakti proper is bhava bhakti. And naturally prem bhakti is like the unfolding of that. And he says, it's like when you are doing a yajna, and the yajna, officially the yajna is when the fire is there and swaha is there. But before the yajna, you have to go to the market and get the sticks and the whatever, all the paraphernalia. Technically speaking, that's not part of the yajna, but that's a preliminary function that without which you have no yajna. So that's totally required for the official yajna to start. So he will say sadhana bhakti is getting the stuff from going to Loi Basar and getting the stuff for the proper yajna that will start when emotional bhakti, bhava bhakti will will manifest. So, which was the point? Well, I mentioned that. I'm testing you also, help me.
The real sadhu-sanga begins after
Thank you. So the point was that we are having sadhu-sanga now, and not to downplay that at all, but it's nice to keep in mind real Sadhu-sanga proper actually begins when we reach the ultimate goal. Again, it's not that it gets reduced the closer I get to Golok, whatever, but it gets maximized and maximized. And then you enter the land of Sadhu-sanga, basically. So Sadhu-sanga is such a crucial anga of bhakti for us. We could make the argument to say Sadhu-sanga is the most important anga of bhakti. Srila Rupa Goswami, as you know, he presents 64 angas of bhakti. And we have some, summary of the most important ones that are mentioned at the end, the last 5 ones. And you have this verse, Sadhu Sanganam Kirtan Bhagavat Shravan, Mathura Bhas, Srimurtir, Shraddhaya Sevan. Interestingly, the first one mentioned is Sadhu Sangha there. No? Now, how we can make an argument Sadhu Sangha is more important than Nam Kirtan. Of course, you have to understand this in context. I'm not downplaying Nam Kirtan, but try to take out Sadhu Sangha from the equation, and which type of Nam Kirtan remains, which type of Sankirtan remains, and what's the very meaning of the implication of Sam Kirtan. One of the ways, as we spoke the other day, is Sangha Kirtan. Samyak Kirtan, Sangha Kirtan. Full Kirtan in quantity and quality, and generally, again, we receive that from Sadhu Sangha. So the very concept of Sankirtan, as we mentioned the other day, is very nice, because Sankirtan is something that you cannot engage by yourself. You need others to engage in that particular practice. So from the very beginning, you have to acknowledge you can engage in Kirtan by yourself, but in Sankirtan, you need others. So from before starting, you need to acknowledge, I depend on others. I depend on my brothers and sisters. No? Always remember, Thomas Mertel will say that. All the main blessings to our life and how we can sustain ourselves come from the prayers of our brothers and sisters. No? We sometimes lose awareness of how much we are sustaining ourselves by the well-wishing of our well-wishers, of our guardians. So that's very humbling and very important to keep in touch. So again, if we want to have some kirtan, first we have to have some. Because if not, you may engage in some kirtan, but not sankirtan. No? Everyone can do some kirtan here, some kirtan there, but sankirtan, you need satsanga, basically. We need connection with the sadhu, no? Through which the name also comes to our life, through which Nam Shrestam comes to our life, as Sri Raghunath Das Goswami prayed, Nam Shrestam. He's saying, Gurudev is giving me, in the words of Srila Siddhar Maharaj, the highest conception of the name. Because Nam is one thing, but we want Nam Shrestam. We want a certain particular conception of Krishna. As we were speaking today in the car, someone asked Srila Siddhar Maharaj once, have you seen Krishna? No? These types of very sober questions. Have you seen Krishna? And Srila Siddhar Maharaj invokes sobriety by saying, the Krishna I want to see is not easy to see. No. That's my answer, he said. Like implying there are different degrees of Krishnas, of Krishna conceptions. So those that can be seen easily, that's not my Krishna, as will say. So Krishna, Abhinatvam Namanam, Krishna is not different from his name. So there are different conceptions of the name also. So we are interested in Nam Shrestam, the highest possible reach, depth, breadth of Sri Nam. And again, we cannot create that from ourselves. We need connection with the higher agency. We need to be allowed to enter into that domain by the Avaroha Panta, it is called, the descending process. We cannot just make our way to heaven, if you will. Stairway to Heaven, nice song, but that's Ravana's way, basically. No? He wanted to do that, no? With all respect. I don't want to harm any psychedelic 70s rock and roll sensibilities, but we want Stairway from Heaven, not Stairway to Heaven. So we can do a version of, better not. I already sounded about thinking about making the version for sure. So the idea is we need Sadhu-sanga, we need the connection with the higher domain so we can actually access the reality of Sankirtan, the reality of Srinam, the reality of Krishna consciousness. We need, again, we are supported by others. We need to support others. This is a nice example also that we shared the other day of the Napoleon chair. No? Someone asked once Srila Sridhar Maharaj, what's Sadhu-sanga? And he quoted Napoleon. I mean, he could have quoted many verses from Shastra, but he was inspired to quote a very interesting Sampradaya. He said Napoleon in his chair. And we said, what's the chair of Napoleon chair? He said once his soldiers went in a certain battlefield and it was getting late and it was snowing and they were not able to sleep on the ground because they will die. So Napoleon thought how to make them way through the night. No? So he said, you sit yourself as if you were a chair, he said to one soldier. There were no chairs, but you sit as if you were a chair. And you act as a chair for the one in front of you. And the one in front of you acts as a chair to the one, and you make a circle. So each one will be a chair for someone and receive chair from someone, if you will. And this way you can pass the whole night, survive that night, supporting each other, giving support and receiving support. And Siamar said, that's Sadhu-sanga. Interesting definition of that. No? How much we depend on each other to survive, basically, or to keep ourselves alive in the most substantial sense of the term. Because the Shastra always speaks about Atmaha and this type of thing. You are a killer of the soul. Of course, soul cannot be killed, but the prospect of the soul can be somehow killed momentarily, at least for some time. So we need to keep that flame basically alive. So real Sadhu-sanga has to do with that, to give support, receive support. So what does it mean? Of course, it's not just some, okay, I give support, some kijais per day, no? Which is the required dose of kijai that each one of you need. I mean, generally the dose of kijai may kill us of an overdose instead of giving support sometimes. No? So the real support, of course, goes beyond whatever official technical affiliation we may have. We are concerned with establishing real relationships. We were speaking about that today, that sometimes it's paradoxical, but we are in a process, we are in one of the processes that speaks more strongly against impersonalism, but sometimes in our daily dealings and relationship, we may end up being quite impersonal, quite not concerned about getting personal, getting into the details that are required for maintaining a personal connection with someone. It takes time, it takes details. It's not just, I know your name, your guru, some of you are an artist, I know you, it's okay, that's all. No, we need to really enter into each other, basically. Of course, there are degrees of trust, degrees of shelter in different status, but we need at least to have some people in our life that we can really enter into. A type of sayuja, if you will, type of merging in the sense of trust and affection and accessing each other's heart, which is not easy, not cheap. Srila Rupa Goswami, as you know, he will say, Guhyama kyati prichati. That's one of the ways we show affection to each other, by being naked in front of each other, if you will, by revealing our hearts and minds, showing ourselves as we are. We have Bhagavad Gita cities, but we have to have ourselves as we are also. Everything has to be as it is, as we say the other day. Not only the Bhagavad Gita, but we ourselves has to be as we are. If not, we are not walking the as it is talk, basically. No? So the point is, whenever we find that opportunity, whenever we find that portal, whenever we find Sadhu-sanga in the real sense of the term, this Sadhu-sanga that is inviting to real progress, we have to give ourselves fully in that direction, no matter which external forms that may take. Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavitamati Kriyatam Yadi Kutopi Labhyate. This is a very famous verse from Padyavali. Actually, Prabhupada says that he was inspired to name his society as he did by this verse, which is describing Krishna Bhakti Rasa and the price to pay for entering to that domain. Tatra laulyam api kalam. But the second line is saying, Krishna Bhakti Rasa and so on, whenever that's available, you get it. And many acharyas have commented, whenever that's available means, do not be, even if it comes in the form of a different institution, in a different container, If you are looking for the essence, take it, wherever it manifests, take it, honor it, respect it at least. No? Do not be entangled by the container, but just go to the content, ideally. We're trying to, as we spoke the other day, all of us, formally, I'm sure, or most of us may belong to a particular institution or mission, and that's okay. We need some container to fill it with the content. But we have always to bear in mind, as we spoke today, we have not joined an institution, we have joined a heart that was beating in that particular institution, that called us, look, I want to follow this particular call, clarion call, if you will. And that, okay, that makes me a formal member or this and that institution, but substantially, I'm joining a heart. And what if I found a heart that is beating according to my inspiration somewhere else? I can also join that heart. And I'm not transgressing any institutional sensibilities, ideally. Because we want to join hearts. That's the reality of Sadhu-sanga in the spiritual world. There are not institutional like fences there, but they are just hearts beating and each one joining another. Like we were speaking these days, or yesterday, I think, with one devotee, that I was telling him, well, technically speaking, I belong to the mission of my Guru Maharaj called Sri Chaitanya Sangha. But now I'm here surrounded by mostly many devotees who serve in the context of ISKCON. So I'm serving in ISKCON. Is that allowed? It's okay. I mean, for me, it's okay. My point is, I mean, there's no problem for me being in that situation. I can even say I'm serving ISKCON. What's the difference between serving ISKCON, serving in ISKCON? And this is not with ISKCON, it's with any whatever name and group. I mean, we can, beyond ISKCON, beyond Sri Chaitanya Sangha, beyond that, we are trying to serve hearts. If you don't converge into that point, there's some degree of impersonalism there still, because you didn't reach the person per se, and you got entangled into some whatever, unofficial Advaita Vedanta current. Officially, you are not a card-carrying member, you say, of the Sankara Sampradaya, but if in the name of being personalist, you are being impersonalist, you may be much more dangerous than an official Advaiting, if you will, to yourself to begin with. So that's a very important point. Rendering seva is not limited to institutional affiliation, basically. When rendering seva, establishing Sadhu-sanga, again, institutional affiliation is there. We are not against that. I mean, I'm not trying to destroy those things, but it's important to give everything its proper place. No, the container is one thing, the content is another thing. Everything in its place will work nicely, basically. So we are after Sadhu-sanga, we are after finding Swajatya, like-minded personalities with whom we can share our life, our hearts, our minds, our shadows and cloudy days as well. Once my Guru Maharaj said that, he said, another replied, what's Sadhu-sanga? And he says, Sadhu-sanga means that at the end of the day, you sit in circle and you share how you failed today with each other.
It'll be a long conversation.
Oh yeah. We have eternity for that. We project Sadhu-sanga forever, so there's time. One way of saying, again, there are so many facets to the jewel of it, but that's the way. No? We have to have the courage and the strength and the sadhu-ness to sit with each other and share how we failed today. Of course, how we failed today, not like encouraging, let's keep failing, but what can we do so tomorrow when we meet again, we can share higher mistakes that we have committed today. Well, we have to refine our falling, if you will, no? Falling upwards, as they say sometimes. No? So Sadhu-sanga is all about that. It's all about trying to, that's Krishna defined for me. It's a very nice verse which speaks about Sadhu-sanga, the unique treasure that Sadhu-sanga is. Matrita matgata prana bodhayanta parashara katayantas shamam nitya tusyanti charamanti cha. Second verse of the Chatur Shloki in the Gita. And Krishna is basically mentioning so much intimacy there. Machita Madgata Prana, their minds and hearts, their pran, their life air, it's all about me, or it's trying to be about me. Maybe it's not about me yet. I'm not fully in their center, but they are trying to put me in the center through their thoughts and words and feelings and sharing. Katayanta Shtamam Nitya, Bodhayanta Parashparam. They're enlightening each other. And again, enlightening each other doesn't necessarily mean I will pose as your senior, and here goes my enlightening. Catch it. And Shaktipad will go. No, maybe let's sit in circle and share how we failed today. That should be enlightening. We are sharing our shadow, but if that's done in the context of sincerity and sadhu-sanga, the shadow will be enlightening. The shadow sharing will be enlightening, basically. So just to not over-idealize this verse and means, okay, we have to enlighten each other, and it's only about having super epiphanies and having the highest degree of revelation. And here we go, the mutual enlightenment. And no, sometimes it's just being authentic, whatever you are. I mean, the concern is being authentic, not being somewhere. Being authentic regarding when you are. So that's real sangha. No? And the Bhagavatam uses many times the term prasanga. Satam prasangam mama vidya. Many verses we say prasanga. Which means, I mean, the same implications should be there in sadhu-sanga, but to make the point clear, sometimes another word is put there to imply prasanga. Sadhu-sanga should be prasanga. There should be a special type of association. No? Do not take it for granted, as we spoke also these days. That was one of the main themes of these days. Be careful with taking Krishna consciousness for granted, of getting accustomed to the extraordinariness of sadhu-sanga. We may accustom, sadhu-sanga. We may not even call that, I'll meet the devotees, I hung out with such and such Prabhu. And you lose sight what's actually taking place, or what can potentially take place in the context of sadhu-sanga. So it's very important that we keep being affectionate to each other. And again, that means giving sadhu-sanga to each other. Being sadhu-sanga for others, receiving sadhu-sanga from others. And again, that takes so many ways. It's not, again, taking like a very forced position. Okay, let's have sadhu-sanga. You quote the verse, no? Or something like this. Let's read something. No? Again, one part of sadhu-sanga, let's share our miseries in the constructive spirit of progressive development, and humility and sincerity. That may be much more empowering than reading a whole canto in 2 hours, maybe. I mean, I'm not diminishing the power of the Bhagavatam, please, just for you to understand. Sometimes we may use these type of things as evasive of dealing with the real thing that is going on in our life at some point. So we need to develop this intimacy, this confidence. For example, the relationship with Sri Guru is to be enacted from that particular stage. Vishrambena Guru Seva, Sri Rupa Goswami is saying, you are expected to relate with Srila Gurudev from the platform of Vishramba. Vishramba means basically intimacy. Sometimes we lose sight of that prospect, and sometimes we just get like frozen in Aishvarya, if you will. And I'm not condemning Aishvarya again. Aishvarya allows Madhurya to happen, it's in the foundation. But the relationship should progress to one of friendship. Like a father has his child in the beginning, there's more, but the father is allowing the kids, first 5 years, kids are doing whatever they want, and the father is allowing. Now Ras is not doing that much, I've been saying this, a little bit more merciful. But eventually, after the next 5 years, the father has to start to establish some parameter, because if not, the baby becomes a beast, basically, a monster. No limits, no parameters, like he will be devoured by his own self-centeredness. And if those things have been done in a proper place, every stage in its own place, eventually the relationship father and child should evolve into one of friendship. I mean, still he is my father, but there is some type of sakya, if you will, there. So with the guru, something like that should happen. Eventually, again, it's not just press a button and it's there, but there's an development of the relationship into seeing my Gurudeva as my dearmost and intimate friend, and I can share. And with say my Gurudeva, I'm not limiting that, of course, to one single person. We may have Diksha Guru, and so on. So Srila Gurudeva is a friend. I mean, it's not should be, he is, she is, and Guru is a student as well, as we know. Actually, to become a guru, as I like to say, means basically to remain a student, but from a different seat. No? And now they are giving you a big seat because you are a guru. But I remain a student. Now they gave me a different seat, different perspective, but to increase my service. So again, Sadhu-sanga has a lot to do with trust, intimacy, opening our hearts, emptying ourselves to be filled. Srila Sridhar Maharaj will comment on this. Guhyamakyati prichati. To reveal our minds means you want to be filled by the grace of the sadhu. You want your heart to be overflowing with that. First, you have to empty your heart from all separate interests. So first you approach the sadhu, you empty your heart. And then the container is ready to be filled. But if the container is already up to the brim, you say, with who knows what, and you say to the sadhu, fill, give my mercy, give your mercy, sorry. And maybe his mercy, her mercy will be start to take things and throw them through the window first. I need to make space and empty it. My Guru Maharaj likes to compare the guru to an interior decorator, you say? So you pay the person who knows what, but some amount, and the person comes and you're expecting, she will like ornament and aesthetics immediately will manifest. But no, he starts to take things and throw them out of the window. And this is not helping, this is extra, this is burden. And you're like, what are you doing? I'm paying you to decorate my house. And you're destroying the whole place. No? And he said, no, you don't understand. This is the preliminary, as we spoke before, function for the yajna, for the actual ornamentation. So sometimes sadhu-sanga, at a certain stage, have to be with that. You get close to the sadhu, and you open your heart, and some things start to appear, and the sadhu, sorry, with your permission, and take like. Of course, this won't be forced. There has to be deep trust and affection before. If not, it's an imposition that is traumatic, maybe. No? But if there is real affection and confidence, it's important that we understand this idea of emptying ourselves to be fulfilled, unlearning stuff to enter into real learning. Sometimes that's the example of the Vamsi, Krishna's flute that is hollow, you say? So we have to become hollow than the Vamsi. So Krishna's breath can pass through us. So Krishna can express himself, right? We can be really instrumental in relation to his will. But for that, we have to become hollow. We have to empty ourselves from all separate interests and be filled by Krishna's whistling. One may whistle and it has some sound, but when you whistle on a flute, some other sound comes there. But the flute has to be follow for that to happen. So, so Sadhu-sanga is a lot about honesty and authenticity. On one side, trying to be, of course, we always speak about our potential, and we should try to be all that we can be, all that we can become on one side, but without pretending something that you are not yet. I know I can be all this. I have this brilliant future by the prospect, by the grace of bhakti. Okay, but at the same time, I cannot pretend that I'm already there. No? For reach there, I have to acknowledge where I am here now. Like we gave this example that when you go to well, maybe you don't go there. You go to the mall? Okay, so example is applicable. So now Rasa goes to the mall. The Swami goes to the mall, it may be some compromise situation, I don't know. I don't go to the mall, but whatever. There may be a chance of going with Nam Rasa someday. So, and you're going to reach shop 108 for sure. So But you don't have a clue where it is because the shopping mall has 1,000 shops. So you need to go to the map at the entrance, which says, here is room 108. But if only says here is room 108, I mean, you're still as lost as before because you need the second indication, which is, so all of you have been to a shopping mall. You are here. Okay, so we need the two things. No, I want to go here, but I'm here. If only says you want shopping 108, shop 108, useless. Only you are here, not too much purpose. But where I am and where I want to be, perfect combination. So, so basically that's it. The idea of Sadhu-sanga actually, no? Sadhu-sanga implies having the capacity, the sincerity, the courage to acknowledge where we are, but also not getting over-identified to where we are because we get stuck there, but all that we can be. But at the same time, do not get over-identified with all that you can be and forget where you are. And forget what you have to do from where you are to be there. And acknowledge your present day capacities, basically. That's another way of speaking about adhikar. We spoke, I think, someday about adhikar as well. So adhikar sometimes is translated as you know, eligibility, or what's this word in English? Aptitude. You have that word? Sorry, I'm practicing my English with you, but I have to. So, but the term adhikar also has to do with till which level you can do something. No? Adhikar. So till here I can do that. I acknowledge my basically limitations and capacities, and I behave accordingly. I don't transgress my adhikar. As Krishna said, better you do your own thing wrongly than try to imitate someone else nicely, basically. So this idea of adhikar is very interesting because sometimes we speak about that like more like even like an, I don't know, like egoic label. You have this adhikar, has this adhikar, but actually adhikar has to do with humbly and sincerely acknowledging where I am and where I want to be and do the needful. And again, that's totally connected with what we are speaking about Sadhu-sanga, trying to be honest, sincere, transparent with each other, acknowledge where we are, how much we can engage in whatever we want to engage, whatever we want to attain, having acceptance. I mean, sometimes it's painful to accept to ourselves where we are. But again, we have to not get over-identified with that and keep in mind, I have this beautiful, promising horizon and prospect that has dawned on my life. And Srila Semras will say that that's one of my favorite quotes from him, which is very simple, but coming from someone like him is special. Say, your future is brilliant. So try to imagine Srila Semras saying that to you, how you will feel. He's seeing through you. I mean, he's seeing something in you that you are not seeing about yourself. And such a personality certainly your future is brilliant. So on those cloudy days that you feel discouraged and you feel, remember, your future is brilliant. That's humbling if you really understand. It's not that I'm so incredible, no, but this is so incredible, Sadhu-sanga. So adhikar actually requires sincerity, honesty. Adhikar is not so much something to go out and start to label everyone else. No, you are a kanishta, and you are a kanishta, and generally it ends there. And you are a kanishta, and only my guru is an uttam. I'm sorry. It's something more to examine ourselves with full acceptance and sincerity, where I am today and where I want to be tomorrow, or short, middle, long-term goal, whatever. So, and trying to maintain some stability where I am now. Maybe we are not in Nishta yet, but we can begin approaching Nishta by having some Nishta in at least exhibiting this type of sincerity every single day. Even if every day I'm a little bit anishta, up and down, learning curve, at least to be nishta, firm, into acknowledging my anishta. To be firm and fixed into acknowledging when I'm not firm and fixed on a daily basis and acting accordingly. So to properly acknowledge our adhikars, I think we quoted the other day, is real virtue. The Bhagavatam is saying, Susvedhikari Dayanishta Saguna Parikirtita. Bhagavatam is saying, To ascertain your own adhikar, that's real piety or virtue. Bhaktivinoda Thakur translates that verse saying, to ascertain your own adhikar, it's real beauty. In other words, he's saying to be authentic and honest about who you are and where you want to be. That's real beauty. No? Please be beautiful. No? No. Try not to act above where you are. Try not to act below where you are. The other day also we were sharing that about these two varieties of sahajism. Now, because generally sahaja means we think, as Srila Samaras will say, full of rush where angels fear to tread. No? You jump into something that is higher than yourself. That's generally called sahaja. You want the easygoing method. But another variety is on the other direction. You are ready to go to a higher level, but you insist in remaining in the lower level. You don't want to grow. You don't want to change. That's another way of wanting the thing easygoing, complacency. No? Like you have the, how do you say in English? The baby pacifier? No? So there is a period for the pacifier, if you will. And moms come and say, okay, time to transcend pacifier now. I say, no, I want to keep with my pacifier forever. So that's a way of, you want the easy go. You don't want to grow. It will be painful. Well, almost traumatic. Like, but imagine if now you have 30, 40, 20, and I throw you to use some pacifiers. Let's have fun. And you will be like, Maharaj, class was nice till this moment. But something is going on. Some bizarre stuff is going on. Because it doesn't make sense to you to continue with that. But because someone intervened in your life and took you by force, and by the force of love, of course. So my point is, you can be sahaja in those two directions and evade adhikar. I don't want to, I'm jumping to something that I'm not ready for, or I don't want to be upgraded to a situation that I should be. I don't want to take the responsibility that implies, basically. So Satsanga has to do with that. The very word sat also, as you know, means real, truth. So sadhu comes from sat. So sadhu basically means honest person. Satam, dharma prito kaitavo, traparabonir matsaranam, satam. The Bhagavatam is saying, this book is for satam, for people who wants to be honest. If you don't want to be honest, this is not your book, basically. First verse, almost, second verse, giving the caution. Just in case, don't tell that we didn't tell you that. This is from the very beginning. You want to thread this Bhagavad Dharma, please be honest, be authentic about yourself to begin with. Because if not, if you are not honest, you can, even use Krishna consciousness as the best possible excuse to not practice Krishna consciousness. Actually, sometimes spiritual life can be the best excuse that we may create to ourselves not to practice spiritual life. We make a show of practicing that, but just as a, how is it in English? Facade? Okay. Yeah. It's written facade, right? Yeah. But it's facade. What is it? Facade. So you can create that. So everyone is like, oh, nice devotee. But actually it's all in an evasive mode, so you don't do what you have to do. So we may even use the most noble things, ideals, to justify the unjustifiable, if you will. So we don't want that in the name of bhakti, basically. So as my Guru Maharaj say, instead, let's meet at night, form the circle, share how we fail. Expose our, as we spoke today with Kumari, let's expose our vulnerability and be empowered by that. Confirmed. Vulnerability is not about getting weaker, but exposing your frailty in such a way, in such a context, that the result will be not exploitation, because if you show yourself vulnerable, of course, some other people may abuse that or may empower you. And of course, we have to know where to expose ourselves in that direction. But technically speaking, vulnerability is the path, if you will, in context of Sadhu-sanga. Dainya, humility, is another way of speaking about vulnerability. Empowerment is the goal, if you will, prem, the ultimate empowerment. But the way to get to that prema-like empowerment, dainya-like vulnerability. And vulnerability has to do again with acknowledging our needs. No problem to be needy. Again, we are worshiping a needy God. No? As I mentioned, Krishna and Vrindavan, so needy of service, so needy of the darshan of Sri Radha, so needy of, I mean, the list is unending. No? Like when Uddhava went to Vrindavan, as you know, he was on a mission trying to convince, to begin with, Nanda and Yashoda, that your son is the absolute. That's a heavy task. He tried his best, trying to serve his master. And at one point he tried to say, Nanda, you are so fortunate. Okay, you feel that Krishna is your son. No problem. But he's the absolute. So you are so fortunate that you feel like that for the absolute. And Nanda looked at Uddhav like a madman, like saying, Uddhav, I thought that I've heard that you were a very wise person. You were Krishna's minister in Dwarka, very sober, learned person. But now that I hear you, I realize that's not true, basically. You are a fool. Imagine. And Uddhav was like, why? Because you're telling me that Krishna is my son. And I mean, I know God. Like Krishna is God, sorry. And Nanda Maharaj said, I know God. I worship God daily. I have Narayan on my altar. I do my daily Sila Puja. I know the nature of Narayan. He's Shanti Purusha, the personification of peace. He's self-satisfied, Atmaram. And I know Krishna on the other side. He's so needy. He wants this, he wants that, he wants that. He cannot be God. End of the topic. No? Buddha was like dumbfounded. So we worship, again, there's nothing wrong with vulnerability. Actually, if proper understood, that's our greatest early gates to transcendence. I always remember Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was, you may know, at one point he expressed a very interesting point. He says, I would like to leave my body in Kurukshetra, which is like pretty unusual for a Gaudiya to say that. Generally, the idea is you live in what we consider our dams, if you will. Kurukshetra is, of course, related to important points in our tradition, but not to the point of let's leave the body there. So someone asked, why? And interestingly, he didn't leave his body there. He didn't make even practical arrangement for that to happen. So that shows that actually he wanted to make a point by saying that. And which was his point? In Kurukshetra, as you may know, as the Bhagavatam describes, Krishna is meeting again the Brajavasis after decades and decades, almost a century of separation. And Sri Radha is meeting, long story short, Sri Radha is meeting Krishna. And Krishna is inviting her to unite with him. But she says, but where is your peacock feather? Where is your flute? Where is the Jamuna? Where is the Vrindavan? Where are you, basically? In other words, Krishna, without all those things, is not, again, our Krishna, as we spoke before. The Krishna we want to join with. So Radha was, it's not possible. We are here, but the union is not possible. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, in that particular moment at Kurukshetra, Sri Radha is in the need of most service. She's in a very situation just about to meet with Krishna, not able. So her necessity of receiving service is in a very high point there. So I want to die there, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said. Like, I want to enter into that portal where the necessity of service is the topmost. Because the greatest the service necessity, the greater the remuneration will come by attending to that. And of course, the remuneration we want to receive is further capacity of rendering more seva. There's not a separate remuneration. Once someone asked Siddhartha Maharaj, what's prem? And prem, he said, prem means you are receiving unlimited amount of energy to offer in service. That's prem, he said. Because sometimes we may even conceive prem in terms of what I will feel. I will experience this ecstatic stuff and this trembling here and this tear there, and I will feel, but someone in prem is not thinking about that. It's even he's cursing ecstasy because it's getting in the way of seva, basically. So again, this is a very important point. No? We want to enter this vulnerable moments, even in the life of the Absolute, to render seva in the most needy moments. Mahaprabhu himself is in a very vulnerable situation, as Krishna, as my Guru Maharaj will say, in a full existential crisis. Thinking, I thought I was Rasaraj, now I see that Radha is tasting something that I do not know. I am Rasaraj or not? And he wants to taste Radha Bhav, and he enters into that mood. So he's in a very needy moment, very vulnerable moment, but also Mahaprabhu is the most volcanic face of the Absolute, interestingly. He's the most vulnerable face of the Absolute, he's the most volcanic face of the Absolute. So there you have the connection between vulnerability and empowerment. If you learn how to be vulnerable, don't lose sight of the topic of Sadhu-sanga here. If you remain vulnerable in the proper sense, the highest prospect for empowerment will come. So we need, I mean, if there's no vulnerability, life is like boring. I remember, I think it was here in the US, there was this comic in maybe 1 century ago, Superman or something. I mean, he always remains, I'm sure, he's almost eternal, but we all even know him in Argentina, other places. But at one point in the beginning of this Superman series, they made the character in such a way that nothing could kill him. So he was totally, like, how to say, invulnerable to anything, no vulnerability allowed. So after a few months, the ones who designed the comic start to see people is buying less and less of the comic. People are finding the character boring because it's too invulnerable. It's not human. There's no emotional bond. We cannot empathize. It's boring. So they invoke this, what, kryptonite? Kryptonite. No? To make Superman vulnerable. No? A little bit more human. And then people started to buy more and more and more. Interesting how it works. We see how it works, the psychology. He's more vulnerable, more attractive, basically. And we are worshiping the all attractive, which means the all vulnerable in one sense. Not in the same way a conditioned soul is being vulnerable, but nonetheless, that's there. So again, our most empowered prospect lies, as I like to say, lies in the land of vulnerability, to put it a little bit poetically. Our most empowered prospect lies in the land of vulnerability. So better we get accustomed to that and deal with that in a healthy way instead of blocking ourselves to expressing those things in Sadhu-sanga. Mahaprabhu in Gambhira was in the highest peak of vulnerability, being fully nourished there by Ramananda Roy, Sarup Damodar, and so on. So vulnerability is important in Sadhu-sanga. If there is no vulnerability at all, probably the exchange is not that constructive, basically. It may be more superficial, and everyone is trying to show their best face, if you will. Social media is basically for that. So like it or not, those things infiltrate in our relationships. We may not realize how much, but hopefully we don't show a separate face in one side and in other. No? Because the secret of spiritual life is basically to have no secrets. Once someone asked my Guru Maharaj, someone said, we have a few minutes, 5 minutes? Someone asked my Guru Maharaj, do you know what, Swamiji, I think that spiritual life should be something private, that one should keep his spiritual practice and things private. And my Guru Maharaj said, well, I think actually that spiritual life means that between your private life and your public life, there's no difference. That's spiritual life. To align to live your life in such a way that you don't need to speak in terms of private life. I don't have anything to hide. Which doesn't mean that I will reveal my mind publicly in Instagram, but there will be some people in my life who knows everything about me. No, not only Krishna. Oh, he knows everything about me. Yeah, but something that we can, how you say, you can, like, accountant, how you say this expression? Yeah, exactly. No? So Sadhu-sanga has a lot to do with that, no? To express this proper vulnerability. And when I say vulnerability, be careful not to mistake with victim consciousness. No, that's the opposite of a real vulnerability, of real Krishna consciousness. I won't go into victim consciousness. That's a whole different seminar, basically. But to end with, this unique treasure of Sadhu-sanga basically is a progressive experience where we are always invited to change those things that can be changed. Some things may not be able to be changed now yet, but there are certain things that for sure we can upgrade. In Latin, they say mutatis mutandis, which means those things that can change should change. So Sadhu-sanga is like an invitation to have that accountability. I'm trying to be willing to change for the pleasure of Krishna, to change for the pleasure of the Vaishnava, and understanding that's the best possible thing for me. Let me finish with this story that I shared the other day with Namras of Srila Siddhar Maharaj also. And once one disciple of Srila Prabhupada, Jashodanandan Swami, went to visit Srila Siddhar Maharaj on one Ekadasi. Today is Ekadasi, so the story is fitting. And he used to do nirjal every Ekadasi, not even water taking. But he will also do very like intense kirtans and leap in the air. So he was a pretty energetic person, because without taking even water and all day singing. So he was there and went to have darshan of Srila Siddhar Maharaj. So Srila Siddhar Maharaj saw him and offered him Mahaprasad from their Thakurjis, without knowing about the nirjal in the beginning. So Jashodanandan Swami said, "Thank you so much, Maharaj, but during Ekadasi, I have this brata for the last maybe 10 years or so that I don't even take water." Oh, Srila said, and leaping in the air, Srila will say. No, at the same time, he was surprised, no, this energetic man. Yeah, that's my standard. Okay. And Srila after a few seconds said, "Do you want some Mahaprasad from my Thakurji?" So Jashodananda Swami was like, maybe he didn't hear me well. So he repeated the whole thing. Oh, Srila said, "Do you want some Mahaprasad from my Thakurji?" So he realized, he said, "Well, Maharaj, I have this brat for the last 10 years, but if you want me to honor Mahaprasad from your deities, I'm ready to break my vow for your pleasure." Srila Maharaj was like, satisfied. And then Srila Maharaj will say many times, "Oh, Jashodananda Swami understood what Vaishnavism is about." Because technically Vaishnavism is not even about Vishnu, but it's about Vaishnava. Vaishnavism is the religion in which we adore and serve Vaishnavas, even above Vishnu Bhagavan himself, because we are worshipping. Our goal is not Krishna, our goal is Krishna Prem. And the sadhus are the embodiment of that feeling. Tadiya Siva, Aradhananam Sarvesham, as you know the verse. No? So yeah, on top of all worship is worship of Bhagavan. On top of that, Tadiya Seva, which includes worship of the Vaishnavas. No? So Sadhu-sanga for us is this idea. So again, for us, Sadhu-sanga is not just to wrap up. Sadhu-sanga is crucial not only as sadhakas, not only to get out any conditioning, but again, especially Sadhu-sanga will be of utmost importance in our enlightened life, when we reach Krishna Prem Janmatenham Punar Mukhyanga. So in eternity, Sadhu-sanga is there. So again, the unique treasure of Sadhu-sanga is, you tell me. Okay, you got the class. Thank you so much to all of you for coming. Sadhu-sanga ki jai. I don't know if we have some few minutes. Okay, a few minutes if anyone has any question or comment or something you might like to share. The Jagannath.
I have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna ask a practical one. Having had the association of devotees for so many X amount of years, and having seen devotees sort of idiosyncrasies play out, one may have inherited like some traumatic experiences, maybe some sense of betrayal, some sense of letdown, etc., and of course their association with devotees. And then what I've observed is that the tendency is to like kind of impose that sense of betrayal or letdown or trauma until like basically the whole environment of devotees, not even necessarily on a conscious level, just you become this kind of jaded and cynical. And so even if you get the chance to associate with even a high level devotee, because you're holding that sense of jadedness or cynicism with you, having been previously betrayed or let down or whatever it was, then you do sadhu-sanga like on the most superficial level, and you're just like, oh, I'm in proximity, conversation, whatever. But you don't really go to the devotees and have like a deep experience anymore. They get something of deep value, just like devotees. It becomes like this sort of spirit, devotees. So what is the cure for cynicism and like jadedness in the culture of associating with devotees?
Yeah. So I would say that we have three ingredients here. On one extreme you have cynicism, on the other extreme you have naivete, and in the middle point will be trust. No? So maybe it all began with naivete, as it's used to begin, with being like naive, basically, and trusting in a not very wise way, if you will, without proper discrimination, and that ended up in certain form of trauma, abuse, negative experience, some level. So we sometimes tend to jump from one extreme to the other, no? From naivete, cynicism. So now every experience is filtered with those lenses, no? And again, maybe I do not fully reject the whole thing, but I'm not giving myself to the whole thing. So the point is that cynicism is, in one sense, as bad as naivete, if you will. They are the two extremes. Two extremes are never healthy. So we need to reach the middle point. And maybe it's important to understand many times we reach the middle point after having gone through the two extremes. So maybe we began being naive. We have been exploited, and I'm not playing the victim, not just our naivety. We go to the other extreme of being cynic. At the end of the day, it doesn't fully work, because in our heart we feel, I'm not fully satisfied with just being a cynic and not being able to trust anyone. I mean, that's not working. But I don't want to be naive again. So now you are invited to reach the middle point, which is trust. And of course, trust means you will feel I'm risking myself. You feel I'm cynic, I'm not risking myself, I'm protected. But cynicism in itself is dangerous to remain there. Of course, you don't want to be naive again. And in one sense, you cannot be naive again, because you have gone through certain degrees, layers of cynicism, but you don't want to end up being a cynic and just seeing everything with those eyes. So no doubt that the experience of trusting again, trying to trust again, will be experienced subjectively as risky, but nonetheless we have to do it. And I will say that at that time we will be better equipped through those suffering experiences to exercise our discernment, take the time we need. Again, it's not like forced confidence. You trust on him from today to tomorrow. We may open our hearts like 1 millimeter, see how it works. Oh, there was no abuse, but I will close just in case. Tomorrow, 2. Oh, still working. 3. At some point you realize, oh, heart is fully blossoming. There's no abuse. There's still some nice people in the planet Earth. There are nice devotees that I can trust in. Because if you reach the conclusion, there's not a single person I can fully give my heart to, you are just one step from killing yourself, basically. Or you already killed yourself by living your life in that way. So eventually you have to turn to that point that I cannot be naive any longer. I cannot be a cynic any longer. I want to trust. And again, that feels risky in the beginning, because all these past samskaras come like, but when you did that, this happened. Yeah, but now I'm better equipped with certain experiences, and I will try to exercise my discernment and take the necessary time. And eventually I will say that the experience will prove successful. And even if in time, some of those experiences started nicely and for some reason didn't end nicely, that's no reason to stop trusting altogether. Still, trust is a full necessity. I mean, it's faith. Another way of picking up faith is trust and confidence. If you don't have that, I mean, someone without faith is paralyzed. So let's say Maharaj will say, suspicion leads to suspension. You cannot move even. I mean, if I really have no faith in anything, I couldn't even make one step, because who knows what will happen if I walk one step. I was paralyzed, literally. So it may feel risky, but the more we do it successfully, we will be empowered again, and that will give us more prospect. And eventually, the more we grow in that exchanges, the feeling even of riskiness will disappear. No, Silas Maharaj will say, in the beginning, we shared that in the car today, we will feel too much risk, little gain. Sometimes we subjectively experience that. Oh, this is being requested from me, too much risk, too much. And what's coming from, it's not proportionate. Little gain, too much risk. The more you grow properly, the more you still do that, although you feel it's risky, by proper advice and company, you will feel the more I take risk, the more the gain. No? Your logic starts to transform from the too much risk, little gain. The more the risk, the more the gain. And eventually you will reach a point where you realize no risk, all gain. I mean, that's the ultimate place we want to achieve. And that's a state of consciousness. Again, it's not a geographical journey. So we need to travel that journey in our inner world. And again, that may take for some few days, a few lifetimes, depending on whatever you had to go through this in previous lifetime. No rush, but at least try to behave in such a way that you know you are advancing towards the direction of trusting, getting that middle point, getting that it's possible. I mean, if you really want to open yourself to that possibility, situations will come to assist you in that. So we shouldn't lose hope, basically. Brief reply. And it's 1 hour, 8 minutes, so we are 108. So maybe an auspicious moment to close our session here. So thank you so much for your time, for your presence. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sadhu-sanga ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Shri Ekadasi ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premananda. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhyaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta koti vaishnava vrinda ki jai. Gaur Haribo.